The crystalline towers of Velthara shimmered under the pale light of twin suns, throwing sparkling reflections across the palace grounds. Inside the grand hall, alien nobles moved with the elegance of centuries-old tradition. They towered over the small princess, their massive forms and armored appearances creating a sharp contrast to her delicate figure. Princess Ilara, barely more than half the height of her peers, stood quietly at the edge of the hall, her silver eyes observing the scene without participating. No alien male had come forward to claim her, and whispers followed her wherever she went. Many called her fragile, some called her weak. Few dared to call her beautiful, because to these alien eyes, strength defined beauty. Ilara had learned to live in the shadows of her own kingdom. Her lessons in diplomacy often ended with patronizing nods or dismissive remarks. When she spoke, her words were frequently ignored. The nobles saw her not as a princess but as a curiosity, a mistake of evolution, a delicate flower in a forest of steel. Even her own father, King Vael, though gentle and loving in private, sighed heavily when thinking of her future. Finding a suitable match among Veltharan males seemed impossible. Each noble, taller and broader than the last, shunned her with polite refusals or derisive laughter. And the princess, who had grown up in the warmth of her father's chambers, felt a gnawing emptiness, a longing for someone who would see her as more than small and weak. On the day the Terran delegation arrived, the palace was alive with anticipation and tension. Humans, they said, were fragile. They were small and soft compared to the Veltharan elite. Some nobles chuckled at the thought that any human could offer insight or value to the kingdom. Among them was Captain Aaron Ward, a human chosen to represent Earth in the diplomatic meeting. Aaron had trained in the Terran fleet, but in Velthara he looked out of place. His body was lean, his movements unarmored and unassuming. Many saw him as insignificant, a soft creature among titans. He, however, paid little attention to appearances, focusing instead on observation. He noticed everything: the way the crystal floors reflected the light, the subtle tension in the air, the faint sighs of the small princess as she moved across the hall. Ilara's attention was divided between the ceremony and her growing discomfort. She sat at the edge of the grand table, hoping no one would notice her. The laughter of the alien nobles filled the air as they discussed the diplomatic treaty, but her gaze remained distant, her thoughts elsewhere. She longed for a quiet moment, away from judgment and expectation. As the ceremony progressed, she excused herself, moving toward the terrace where the moonlight painted the crystalline walls with soft reflections. She paused, her hand brushing against the cold surface, trying to steady her racing heart. Aaron, having noticed her departure, followed quietly. He did not speak at first, respecting her need for solitude. On the terrace, the twin moons cast pale silver light across her delicate form. She looked at the horizon, eyes distant, as though searching for something unreachable. Aaron cleared his throat softly, and Ilara turned, startled yet not frightened. She did not expect a human to follow her, let alone speak to her. "I noticed you left," Aaron said, his voice calm, carrying a weight of sincerity that seemed to surprise her. "Are you all right?" Ilara hesitated. She wanted to dismiss him, to tell him she was fine, but something in his gaze, steady, patient, without judgment, made her pause. Slowly, she spoke. I am used to being ignored. It does not matter." Her voice trembled slightly, betraying the pride she tried to hold. Aaron stepped closer but maintained a respectful distance. "Being ignored doesn't mean you are weak. Sometimes the world just doesn't know how to see strength in quiet ways." For a moment, the princess said nothing. The words were strange, unfamiliar, yet comforting. No Veltharan had ever spoken to her like this, acknowledging her presence without patronizing her. Something in her chest loosened. For the first time in many years, she felt seen. They spoke long into the night, talking of stars, of worlds beyond Velthara, of stories each had never told anyone else. Ilara taught Aaron the names of the constellations in her language, and he listened, fascinated. She laughed softly at his mispronunciations, and in turn, he shared tales of his fleet, of human courage in the face of impossible odds. It was a meeting of two worlds, and both felt a spark of understanding that transcended size, species, and expectation. Days passed, and the human delegation continued their diplomatic duties. Alara remained cautious but found excuses to spend time with Aaron. She discovered that he was not intimidated by her small stature. He did not pity her. Instead, he asked questions, listened, and believed in her insights. The nobles noticed, and many scoffed. "A human has chosen the princess," they whispered, their voices dripping with disbelief. Their growing friendship was tested the day the palace suffered a sudden sabotage. The central power core, which regulated the crystalline energy that lit the city, began to destabilize. Alarms rang through the halls. Guards rushed to contain the problem. But the engineers discovered that the readings were inconsistent. It was subtle, a hidden threat unnoticed by most. Ilara, who had studied the palace systems quietly for years, noticed the anomaly first. She approached the nearest engineer, but he dismissed her. "You are small. You do not understand this," he said brusquely, returning to his consoles. Ilara's heart sank. But she did not give up. She ran toward the chamber, shouting warnings, but doors closed in her way. It was Aaron, noticing her urgency, who followed her. Without hesitation, he believed her. Together, they entered the unstable energy chamber, dodging sparks and shifting energy fields. The crystal walls crackled with power, threatening to collapse. Aaron's human instincts and quick thinking, combined with Ilara's knowledge of her home, allowed them to stabilize the core just in time. The court watched in shock as the small princess, with a human at her side, saved countless lives. It was a moment of revelation. The nobles saw bravery, intelligence, and courage in someone they had dismissed for years. Ilara, standing among the sparking remnants of the chamber, looked at Aaron. His uniform was scorched, his hands cut and bruised, yet he smiled, his eyes warm. "Are you hurt?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Only a little," he replied with a grin. "It was worth it." The king entered the chamber, his face a mixture of pride and astonishment. He bowed to the human delegation, and in front of the court, Aaron spoke plainly. "You call her small. I call her extraordinary." The hall fell silent. The words echoed, reaching even the most skeptical of nobles. For the first time, many saw what had been invisible for years. The princess was not weak. She was brave, intelligent, and capable in ways no measure of size could define. After the chaos, Ilara and Aaron stood outside the chamber, their hands brushing against each other in quiet solidarity. No one spoke. Words were unnecessary. A connection had formed, one born of courage, trust, and recognition. In that moment, both of them understood that this was the beginning of something far larger than friendship, larger than diplomacy. It was a bond that would challenge the very traditions of Velthara itself. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the crystal towers in shades of violet and gold, Ilara finally smiled. Not the careful, restrained smile she wore for the court, but a true smile, one born from being seen, respected, and chosen. Aaron watched her, the glow of the setting suns reflecting in her silver eyes. He did not speak, for words could not capture what had happened between them. Instead, he offered a simple gesture. He extended his hand, palm open, a silent promise that he would stand by her, no matter what. Ilara took it, her small fingers closing over his larger ones, and in that simple touch lay a declaration stronger than any law, stronger than any royal decree. She had been unwanted, overlooked, and underestimated, but now she had someone who chose her not for duty, not for politics, but because he saw her worth. The court remained a distant echo as the princess and the human walked the terrace together, their steps synchronized, their minds aligned. The galaxy beyond Velthara was vast and unpredictable, and already, its mysteries called to them. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. And in the quiet of the night, beneath the twin moons, the small princess finally felt something she had never felt before: hope. The halls of Velthara were alive with whispers the next morning. The nobles could not believe what they had witnessed the day before. A human had stood beside Princess Ilara, and together they had saved the palace from disaster. Some laughed quietly, thinking it absurd. A human daring to protect a Veltharan princess, they murmured. Others were uneasy, sensing a power they did not fully understand. It was the first time anyone had seen courage measured not by size or armor, but by heart. Ilara, however, paid little attention to the murmurs. Her thoughts were consumed by the events of the previous night. She had never felt so seen, so respected, and so safe. The human, Captain Aaron Ward, had not only believed in her, but had acted on that belief. And in her heart she realized that for the first time she had someone who chose her, not out of duty or pity or obligation, but because he wanted to. Aaron, too, felt the change. Despite the palace's traditions and expectations, he had grown to admire Ilara's quiet strength. She had survived rejection and isolation with a grace that he knew few could match. Her small size, which others mocked, had never limited her ability to act decisively, to think clearly, or to lead when necessary. To him, she was extraordinary, and he knew that any world would be better for having her fully recognized as its leader. Yet the council was not ready to accept this. The king, though proud of his daughter, faced pressure from the nobles. Veltharan tradition demanded that Ilara be matched with one of their own, a warrior of strong bloodline and towering stature. The idea that a human could stand beside her as an equal was unthinkable to most of the council. When King Viel convened the meeting, the tension in the grand hall was palpable. Aaron was summoned to stand before the council. The nobles' gazes were sharp, questioning, almost hostile. Many expected him to fail simply by virtue of being human, weak, and soft. When the king spoke, his voice carried the weight of authority. Captain Ward, you have acted bravely, yet you are a human. Our traditions do not allow for union between Veltharans and other species. The princess's future must serve the kingdom. Aaron stood tall, though he was smaller than every Veltharan present. His voice was calm but firm. Your Majesty, I do not seek to defy tradition. I only ask for the chance to prove that courage, honor, and devotion are not measured by species, size, or strength. If the princess may choose, I hope she will decide based on what is right, not what is expected. The council erupted in whispers and mutters. Many nobles scoffed openly. The human could not possibly survive the challenges that awaited those who would claim the princess. It was then that the king made a decision that would change everything. If you truly wish to stand beside her, Captain, you must pass the trial of radiant stone. No human has ever done so. If you succeed, the princess's choice will be honored. Aaron's eyes met Ilara's. She smiled faintly, a mixture of hope and concern. You don't have to do this for me, she whispered, but he shook his head. I choose to, he replied simply. She nodded, understanding that this was his way of showing her that his choice was genuine, and that he respected her as more than just a fragile princess. The trial was grueling. It took place in the Crystal Desert, a vast expanse of jagged, sparkling terrain that stretched for miles. The sun reflected off the crystal spires, creating mirages that confused and disoriented travelers. The air was thin and scorching, and the winds carried shards of crystal sharp enough to pierce armor. Each contestant was tested on endurance, strategy, and intelligence. For Veltharan warriors, it was a challenge they had trained for their entire lives. For Aaron, it was nearly impossible. He began his journey with caution, walking carefully across the glassy surface. Each step was deliberate. The desert seemed endless, and with every mile, he felt the weight of expectation pressing down on him. Nights were colder than he imagined, and the twin moons created shadows that shifted like living things. He remembered Ilara's words. You already made me proud. Those words became his anchor, giving him strength when his own body faltered. During the third day, a sandstorm of crystal shards struck. The wind cut through Aaron's skin, and he stumbled over uneven surfaces. Many would have given up, but he pressed on. He remembered the people he had saved at the palace, and he thought of the princess waiting for him. With careful planning and steady breathing, he shielded his body and moved forward, step by painful step. Meanwhile, back in the palace, Ilara waited. She rose each day at sunrise, standing on the balcony that overlooked the desert. Her heart ached with worry, yet she trusted him. She remembered how he had believed in her, even when everyone else ignored her. That trust now became a bridge between them, invisible yet unbreakable. On the third night, Aaron reached the Chamber of Radiance, the final part of the trial. The chamber was filled with towering crystal formations that emitted a blinding light. The radiant stone, a gem of immense energy, floated in the center, protected by shifting fields of energy. He approached carefully, calculating each movement. Every step could trigger the defense mechanisms, yet his determination never wavered. Drawing on human ingenuity and his understanding of Ilara's teachings, he manipulated the crystals to open a path, his hands steady even when his body screamed for rest. Finally, he reached the stone. The energy around it pulsed like a heartbeat, testing his resolve. Aaron took a deep breath, remembering the princess's eyes, and reached out. His fingers closed around the gem, and the energy fields dissipated instantly. He had done what no human, and few Veltharans, could accomplish. When he returned to the palace, the council gathered to witness the outcome. Aaron was battered, bruised, and exhausted, but his eyes shone with triumph. He held the radiant stone before the king. Silence filled the hall. The nobles who had mocked him now looked with a mixture of awe and disbelief. The human had succeeded where many Veltharan warriors had failed. King Vael stepped forward, his expression unreadable. Then he smiled, a warm and proud smile. "Captain Ward," he said, his voice echoing through the chamber, "you have proven what many have forgotten. Strength is measured not by size or species, but by courage, honor, and heart. The princess's choice will be honored." Ilara stepped forward, her silver eyes glistening with tears. She ran to him, her small hand slipping into his larger one. "You did it," she whispered, her voice full of relief and wonder. "You chose me and you made them see." Aaron smiled softly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "No one should have the right to decide your worth but you," he said. "I only did what I thought was right." The council bowed in acknowledgement, some reluctantly, others with newfound respect. The nobles could not argue with courage and success.
In the end, a human had not only survived Velthara's most dangerous trial,
but had earned a place beside the princess, reshaping their kingdom's understanding of strength. From that day on, Ilara and Aaron were inseparable. They trained together, exploring the palace and its surrounding lands, learning from each other, growing together. The princess was no longer an overlooked figure. She walked with confidence, her decisions respected, her courage recognized. The human who chose her had not only saved her life, but had given her a new place in her own world. Together they began planning for the future, envisioning a Velthara where strength was measured by heart and mind, not just size or tradition. And in the quiet moments, when the twin suns rose over the crystal towers, Ilara and Aaron would stand together, looking out over the world that had once dismissed her, knowing that they had changed it forever. Their story spread beyond Velthara, carried across the stars. Humans were no longer seen as fragile or weak. The tale of the small princess and the courageous human became a symbol, a reminder that true strength could come from anywhere, and that choosing to see the value in others could change the course of entire worlds. Ilara, who had once been unwanted, finally smiled without reservation, and Aaron, who had crossed impossible trials to stand beside her, knew that this was only the beginning of a partnership that would echo across galaxies for generations to come. Under the twin suns and shining crystals, a small princess and a human stood side by side, not as anomalies but as equals, proving that courage, heart, and choice were the true measures of greatness. And in that unity, both worlds discovered a new kind of heroism, the kind that begins not with power but with seeing the worth in someone else.